It's that time of year again, folks. With August wrapping up and the summer season coming to a close, this is the typical time of the year where your regional theme park players, like Six Flags, announce their new rides for 2023. Now, with Six Flags' biggest competitor, Cedar Fair, basically breaking the bank on upcoming 2023 editions, with several major expansions across a number of parks, which is atypical of Cedar Fair, as they usually only make a couple of major additions at a few parks, but this year, they've really not been shy in spending their money. So with that being the case, what does Six Flags have up their sleeves, right? The COVID pandemic is long gone. The expectations are even greater than they have been for the last 3 years to build something magnificent for the next upcoming season. So brace yourself, because I'm about to give you a sneak peek of what Six Flags is building at each of their parks in the 2023 season. That's right, it's nothing! Now, if you watched my last video about the state of Six Flags, then you know the new CEO has no interest in building new rides. He wants to focus on other things right now. And he doesn't think that there's any value in building new rides, as he feels that there's plenty of ride capacity at the parks, even though we all know that that's not really the issue. The issue is quality, not so much capacity. So with this being so clearly and obviously stated by Salim himself, surely my contemporaries here on YouTube are spreading the message far and wide that the 2023 season for Six Flags is not going to be anything to write home about.
Six Flags is about to announce some of the craziest new coasters for the parks in 2023.
I think it's a safe bet that Six Flags will add a coaster somewhere in the chain for this upcoming season.
Six Flags Mexico. The chain treats this park very well, and I think they are about to open a major new coaster.
Six Flags New England's new dive coaster.
I think Over Georgia is getting ready to open a massive new coaster that may be one of the best in the world.
Six Flags Great America. And I think they're going to be adding an RMC Raptor in 2023.
That leads me to Great America. They are getting a new coaster for 2023. I'm positive about it.
Oh, I guess not. Now, I don't really have a problem with people predicting things, even if they're wildly false. But, of course, I could definitely see how they could build up expectations for the people who are watching it. Like, they get all excited to go to Six Flags, then only to find out, of course, that there is no major addition coming to the parks, and in fact, they're actually getting basically nothing. So, yeah, maybe want to kind of reel it back now that we know all this information, that Salim has been very upfront about what his plans are for the company, which, in case you need a refresher, he does not want to spend money on rides because instead, he wants to be spending money on technology, which will make it easier for guests to spend money in the park, such as upgrading your season pass easier, buying Flash Pass easier, basically making it easier for you to give Six Flags more money. On top of this, he also wants to invest money in changing the way that the parks are laid out, aka more single rider lines, basically finding out ways that you can get more rides per day when you visit the park. On top of this, he also just wants to pack the calendar with a ton of different events that he's hoping will bring people to the park, even though basically all the events are more or less the same, with the exception of like Fright Fest and Holiday in the Park. But bottom line is, he wants to cut expenses as much as possible. That is his ultimate goal. He doesn't want to spend money at all. Yes, he is spending money on some things, but in his mind, he could see a more direct path to making more money by upgrading their technology and improving the way that the parks are laid out, as opposed to building new rides, which of course have this massive upfront cost and then have upkeep and maintenance costs that come along with them. And he doesn't see the value in doing that. So let's reel it back a bit, and let's be honest. I will concede a few things. There is one park in the chain that actually will be getting, at least I assume will be getting, something major in 2023, and that is Six Flags Over Texas. I believe they will finally open Aquaman Power Wave. Now, this is a roller coaster that was supposed to open up in 2020, but got delayed, thanks to the pandemic and several other factors. And I think that finally now they are ready to open it next year. This way, Salim could go on his earnings call next year, and when they ask him the same question about why they're not building more rides, he could be like, what are you talking about? We just built Aquaman. Even though he didn't even approve of that ride. That was approved by the previous administration and was only carried over because it opened 3 years late. On top of this, it looks like maybe Mr. Freeze will be getting a slight modification, potentially getting the trains turned around to be forward-facing. So there you go, Over Texas. You're going to have a decent year, I guess, but everyone else, sorry. But while we're playing the speculative game What about beyond 2023? What about 2024 and beyond? Well, I would imagine it's going to take some convincing, but I think Salim will get pushed into building some new rides. Now, it may only be flat rides and water park additions and small stuff, but it's possible that depending on how things go, he may be convinced to build some coasters here and there. But let's be honest, is he going to go for anything expensive like Dr. Diabolical's cliffhanger like we're getting at Fiesta Texas, a B&M? No shot. What Salim would approve of is something relatively cheap. Think of an RMC conversion or even an RMC Raptor, or hey, maybe even more SNS 40 free spins, right? Because bottom line is, if you're going to convince Salim to spend money on a coaster, he's going to want to spend the least amount of money possible. One of those things that costs the least amount of money possible are prototypes. Basically, new roller coaster models that have never been put into a major theme park and have never been tried, trued, and tested. Though they tend to be pretty novel and unique, the reason why they're cheaper than your average coaster is because there's a chance things might not go right. It's a prototype after all. We're testing it out for the first time. Here's an example. I mentioned the SNS 40 free spin earlier. That was once a prototype at a Six Flags park that was massively successful, it was reliable, had great capacity, and it was a crowd pleaser. So it's no surprise that Six Flags cloned this thing to basically every park in the chain. But sometimes you fall on the opposite side of the coin. Look at Max Force, a ride that's generally well liked. I like it personally, but there's no denying it has had operational issues since the day it opened. It consistently has significant downtime throughout the season year after year. On top of this, even when it is open and operating smoothly, the capacity is so garbage, the wait time, you can always count on it to be astronomical. So it comes as no surprise to me that SS has not been contracted to build any more of these by Six Flags or by anybody else. How about another one from SNS, Steel Curtain at Kennywood? Now, I haven't done the math on it, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this thing has been down more than it's been open. I mean, it was literally closed for almost all of 2021. Because yeah, as you might have guessed, the operational issues have been so bad, and they've still been bad to this day. These are two prototypes that got approved basically off the back of the SNS 40 free spin because that was such a successful prototype model. Six Flags and Kennywood were saying, hey, you got any other great ideas lined up back there? We're willing to take a shot with you because your first prototype that you've done in a while was a massive success. But obviously in this situation, didn't really work out, and it's no surprise we don't see these models getting contracted to be built anywhere else. But to not pick on SNS too much here, let's talk about a prototype from Intamin. Back in 2012, Intamin built Skyrush over at Hershey Park, a prototype roller coaster model. And although this is literally one of my favorite roller coasters ever, and is also many other people's favorite roller coasters out there, there's a reason why Intamin has not built any more. It's because the ride has faced operational issues since day one. And now, just 10 years later, there are plenty of rumors circling around of the ride closing. I don't think it will close, at least not in the short term, especially saying that Wildcat just closed at Hershey Park, but you get the idea. I mean, this ride is probably not going to have a massive lifespan because it has faced operational issues for so long that it's cost Hershey Park a ton more money than other more reliable models have. So as you can see, prototypes are pretty risky. And for Six Flags going forward, if you're only going to be building a couple, if only even just one roller coaster a year going forward, I would not be taking a chance on prototypes. Instead, would spend a little bit extra more money for something that's reliable, something that's trusted, something that's been tried, and go from there. But evidently, not everyone agrees with me here.
Six Flags Great America. We know that Six Flags loves gimmicky marketing, and an Access coaster would fit that bill perfectly. Six Flags Fiesta Texas. I honestly think, as long as these coasters aren't crazy expensive, have Six Flags written all over them.
So if I had to pick a chain at this time that would get the Access coaster, I would go with the Six Flags chain. The Six Flags Fiesta Texas.
I'm thinking Six Flags over Georgia.
My top pick is Six Flags Great America. What's your top pick?
My top pick was Six Flags over Georgia.
Because Access has Six Flags written all over it.
Yes, and I don't see like Cedar Fair or SeaWorld parks jumping at a prototype like this.
Wait, what's this? A prototype coming to a SeaWorld park? What's this? A prototype coming to a Cedar Fair park? Huh, well that's weird, isn't it? Anyways, I don't want to talk about that too much, but what I will say is the SNS Access Coaster, which was announced back in 2019, it's the new prototype from SNS, of course, you know, who are basically becoming the prototype guys at this point. And it seems that pretty much everyone in the community cannot fathom that the SNS Access Coaster could go to any other chain than Six Flags. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're wrong, but I'm going to hope that they're wrong, because what people have to understand is that Salim's strategy going forward, if he's ever building roller coasters, it's going to be maybe 1 to 2 a year, okay? I do not want to see Salim and Six Flags be taking a risk on a prototype when you're only building a couple of coasters a year. Back when Six Flags was building new rides at every park every year, it made sense to take some risks on prototypes and throw them at the wall and see what stuck. Because if it didn't work out, well, guess what? Next year you're getting a new ride anyways. But now you're talking about building an access coaster that maybe could fall on the wrong side of things, that could screw over a park that maybe hasn't gotten anything significant in 5+ years and won't get anything significant for 10+ years. So it's not really a great risk to be taking. I'd rather you spend a little bit more money and build something that you know is reliable, something you know you can count on, something that's not as much of a risk. Now, do I think Salim's going to do that? I have no idea. I have a feeling that people are going to put options out in front of him and he's just going to pick the one that has the lowest price tag on it. He doesn't care if it's a prototype or not. Well, I hope he does. I really hope he does. And I hope he says, you know what, let's spend a couple more $1,000,000 on an RMC Raptor or a smaller premier model, right? Something that has been tried and true, something that you are not going to risk wasting your money on. The Access Coaster could be amazing and could be a smash hit home run like the 40 free spin was. But we don't know. We don't know. And quite frankly, I don't think that Six Flags with their current strategy going forward should be taking a risk on a prototype. I know I said earlier that I wouldn't say that anybody was wrong here in predicting a prototype coming to Six Flags. But there is one take that people have been saying since the Access Coaster was announced all the way up until today that I think is dead wrong.
But I think Great America is such a perfect fit for this because Six Flags Great America has an extremely well-rounded collection of rides. And the Access Coaster is going to be completely different than everything else. And so by nature, because they have already so many rides, it's a little bit tricky for them to find something that kind of fits that niche. I think that Six Flags Great America will be adding an Access as their next roller coaster.
Try again. You see, Great America, I never understood this. Why did people predict this thing over and over again? Do you guys remember when I just mentioned Max Force? I mean, the park will tell you that was a massive success, but let's be real. That thing has not been a success. Downtime after downtime, low capacity after low capacity, long wait after long wait. That is not a dub, okay? That's an L. That's a massive L. And quite frankly, if I was the park president of Six Flags Great America and Salim came to me and said, you know what, man, we are going to give you a new roller coaster, I'd be like, hell yeah, what is it, man? And he said, oh, we're going to give you an SNS Access Coaster. I'd be like, excuse me? We just got an SNS prototype and it's not really been the most successful thing. Could you maybe give us something that we don't have to worry about breaking down all the time and having to deal with all these maintenance and upkeep issues that Max Force currently faces? You might think I'm insane for saying this, but quite frankly, if I was the Six Flags Great America park president and I was offered the SNS Access Coaster as my next coaster, I'd be like, nah. I'll wait a couple more years for something new. And you might think that's insane, but you gotta look at Great America's status right now. Okay, they just built Max Force, and it's the least reliable ride in the entire park. It faces the most downtime despite being the newest ride. That should not be the case. On top of this, Great America is extremely strapped on space. They don't have a whole lot of land to work with here. If they were to build an Access Coaster, at least one, if not multiple rides, would have to be gutted to build it. Which means, guess what? If this went the way of a Steel Curtain or a Sky Rush, then guess what? You just got rid of a whole bunch of reliable rides for one that is unreliable. And it's going to be costing you a lot more to maintain. Now, of course, I'm not in charge of Great America, so I can't necessarily say what the park president is actually thinking over there, and I can't say what Salim is thinking either. But I would honestly hope that they do not take a chance on Access, especially in that park. Like, please, not that park. Anyways, folks, I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, you guys already kind of knew this. The future is not looking particularly bright for Six Flags. Don't expect anything next year other than maybe Aquaman at Over Texas. And beyond that, who knows? Who knows if we'll get any new roller coasters? And if we do, it's going to be bottom of the barrel, cheap stuff. And may very well be prototypes that don't work out. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I love to hear what you have to say. And I'll see you all next time. Peace.